Beatrice Villela was a 19-year-old from San Antonio, Texas. She was a beautician who had hopes of moving to Chicago. On September 28th, 1980, Beatrice allegedly met up with her boss to pick up supplies, then took them to his salon. Beatrice then left. She was never seen again. I'm Ed Dentzel, and this is Unfound. I don't know if it was some kind of cosmic happening or coincidence, but as I was preparing this episode for all of you, I came across a statement that could certainly apply to today's disappearance. It said something to the effect that every young woman should be suspicious of any much older man who takes an interest in her, that he doesn't really think she is mature for her age. In fact, if that young woman would talk to women that guy's age, she would find that they think he is immature for his age, and that he, in actuality, is a bum and a predator. So true. Yet, young women fall for this type of guy all the time. The shoes, the jewelry, the trips, and maybe even the cars and houses. But then the problems start. The control, the possession, the stalking. It's almost become a cliche at this point. Well, in the disappearance of Beatrice Villela, she was put in a tough position when her boss started doing the same to her. Then she was gone. And we're left to decide if Beatrice disappeared due to her being a kept woman. And now a summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Lyonez's website, charleyproject.org. Beatrice, for only being 19, was already doing a lot with her life. She had already gotten her beautician's degree and license. Beatrice had her own car and lived on her own. Her next step, Beatrice told people, was to move to Chicago, where her sister lived, to continue to broaden her horizons. And at the time of her disappearance, Beatrice actually had a ticket to fly there. But there were issues. The much older and married owner, Oscar, at the salon where Beatrice worked, had taken an overt interest in her, buying her lots of stuff. And yes, Beatrice was living on her own, but she was living in his condo. Not to mention, not long before she disappeared, Beatrice and this guy had a falling out, but they had allegedly patched things up. So, on September 28th, 1980, according to Oscar, although 41 years later there is no proof he told the truth, Beatrice and he met up at a beauty supply place. They got what they needed and took them back to the salon. Oscar says Beatrice then left. She was never seen again. There were no signs of violence at the condo. Her car was found a month and a half later in an apartment complex less than a mile from where she lived. The investigators could not connect anyone there to Beatrice. However, residents said they had seen Beatrice there before. The car yielded no clues. By now, you know I call this type of disappearance a "the man said" scenario, wherein a guy tells a story about a missing woman that is suspicious, yet not physically impossible. The difference with Beatrice's, of course, is that she was seemingly the other woman. So how will that factor into your calculations as you try to answer these 3 questions? Number 1, why in 1980 did investigators not verify Oscar's story about the beauty supply store? Number 2, since residents of the apartment complex where her car was found said they saw Beatrice there before September 1980, are you open to a theory of someone other than Oscar being the best suspect? And number 3, whether there was foul play or not, how should investigators, amateur or professional, go about moving this case forward? Beatrice's family has been conflicted over the past 41 years as to the cause of her disappearance due to one of their own marrying someone in Oscar's family. The guest for this episode, and he's appearing for the 5th time, is Anthony from crimeblogger1983.blogspot.com. Unfound News. I hope you enjoyed and were surprised by this past Monday's special edition of Unfound, where I interviewed John Lorden. If you've not listened to it yet, it was wide-ranging. We talked about his background, the current state of the true crime community, and the fallout from his involvement in the Alyssa Lamb show on Netflix. Next, likewise, I hope you caught my appearance on John's channel on YouTube that came out last Friday, November 19th. We talked about the Steve Panky trial, our impressions of why it ended in a hung jury, and what the future holds for that case. Once again, if you haven't watched it yet, please do so. Finally, I hope everyone had a fantastic Thanksgiving. I certainly did. Hey, anytime I can just eat and do no cooking, it's always good. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on iTunes, Pandora, Audible, Podomatic, Spotify, iHeart, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Deezer, and YouTube. Speaking of YouTube, on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, please join us for the Unfound Live Show. Watch, ask questions, and give the show a thumbs up. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/Unfound Podcast. This week, I need to thank Craig, Deidre, and Stacy. You can also contribute at PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. I also need to give a huge shout out to all the people who have monetarily contributed using the Super Chat during the live show on Wednesday nights. Thank you for watching, and thank you for donating. The email address, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. Merchandise, the books at amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Do not forget the reviews. Shirts at unfound-podcast.myshopify.com, or you can track down my assistant Heather in the Facebook group. Playing cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/unfound-podcast. The website, theunfoundpodcast.com. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you. I'm so happy once again to have on an episode of Unfound the person who has been on Unfound more than anybody else except for myself, of course, Anthony from crimeblogger1983. Anthony, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. I'm glad to be here again.
Yeah, it's been a year for you. Your work has gotten recognized internationally. Of course, you have an international blog anyway, but on TV, a new medium maybe for you. And see, we certainly want to talk about that a little bit later in this interview, because I'm sure everybody's very interested in the work that you did on a murder that unfortunately is still unsolved. But it's been a year, and we'll talk about your stardom later. So today, though, we're talking about the disappearance of Beatrice Villela. how did you come across this? It's always interesting to me to hear about the process that somebody else uses. We've talked about it with you before, but let's talk about it again. Your process. How did you pick out Beatrice's disappearance? What went into that? What went into that?
I was looking for another case in San Antonio that may have been related. I just looked at we covered Princess's case,
right,
in a previous episode.
Yes, we did.
I was looking for possible cases that might be related to her case, and I came across Phoebe's, which it's not related to her case, but I noticed that there was nothing really on Phoebe's case at all. So it's one of those ones that I put aside and wanted to look into.
Huh. All right, so it's just as simple as that. As we know, there's many disappearances out there, but this is another Texas case, just like Princess's was. Another, I guess, Hispanic woman. Is that just a coincidence, or what?
Yeah, I was looking for, like I said, I looked for a connection, and that's probably what happened. But, and I just came across this one, and they didn't get any attention, and those are the ones I really liked. I like to be able to dig into those ones.
Right. Okay. Just to give maybe the listeners an idea, how many, I know that, you're fairly particular about what you write about for your blog. How many cases would you say you go through before you decide on one to write? I guess the question is, what is the ratio between ones you examine and then the ones you actually work on? What would you say that is?
I don't know if I can't come up with a number, but I know that there's a lot of cases that I know very, very well that I continue to look into that I haven't wrote about. And that's usually because the writing thing is kind of, it's becoming more difficult just because of the time it takes to actually write it out. So,
right.
But there's a lot of cases that I've either written up, that are in my drafts on my blog that I haven't been able to finish yet, or I'm still looking into. I never look at just one case at a time. I have dozens, unfortunately, which is good and bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. So, and how many, of course, this is a question you don't know you're going to get, but maybe you can just guess. How many cases do you have on your blog now, approximately?
Probably around 55, I think.
About 55. Okay. And how long have you been doing that?
As long as you've been doing this, we started around the same time, so 2016, I think it was September.
All right. So in about 5 years, 55 cases, so about 10 years, almost one a month then.
Yeah, usually it's a continuing process too. I don't write and then stop investigating the case. I continue to look up on it, so it's very time consuming.
Okay. Yeah, and we have to remember that unlike myself, that does full-time full-time, you have a job that you do full-time, so this is something you have to, and you are a father and everything else, so this is something you just have to find the time to do when you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, very good. All right, let's move on a little bit. Now, I know in reading the entry about Beatrice's disappearance, this was something you wrote about, though, in 2019. But you'd said in the blog that you had not spoken before publishing the blog to Beatrice's family. That was written in 2019. Has that changed since 2019 or not?
Not much. I spoke to a nephew of hers, but he wasn't alive at the time she went missing. And I have sent direct messages to the three sisters. I've commented on a Facebook timeline on all of theirs, and they were not interested in speaking with me. Not that they said that, but they didn't respond to me. So
right. How common would you say that is in your work you've been doing for these 5 years? How common is that when you try to reach out to a family and they don't respond?
Usually I can get a rapport going with them, even if they don't want to talk, as long as I let them know, hey, I'm still going to be here, still looking into this. If you want to speak to me, that's fine. If not, I completely understand. there's been a few times where, such as this case, and I spoke to you about another one that I profiled, Reed Jepson's case, where if the family completely ignores me, or they're completely against me even profiling it, there's usually a reason for that.
Right.
And I can usually dig in and find out why.
Right, and you were just telling me before we started this interview, you might have found a reason why they've ignored you? Maybe.
One of the sisters is married into the family of the person I think is responsible for BB's disappearance.
Wow. Okay. Now, we should, though, understand, though, you talked to this nephew who wasn't even born in 1980, which makes it a little difficult to, get any information from somebody like that. But you did get the police files for Beatrice's disappearance. Let's talk a little bit about that process. How hard was that? How long did it take? How large was the file? What can you say?
I can't. San Antonio PD, I don't know what's with them. I hadn't had good rapport with them either through Princess's case either. So I don't know. But I went to school with a girl that had connections within the department, and she got that for me. Actually, wow. They weren't going to release it for me.
Okay. And when did you get it? Is it a big file, or how helpful was it?
It was pretty helpful. They redacted it. But usually when they redact files like that, it usually ends up leading me in the direction that I needed to go in to begin with. So it really doesn't help if they're trying to keep information away from me. I usually find out what it is anyway. So.
Okay. All right. So do you think, had you not had this connection, that you probably wouldn't have gotten it at all?
Probably not.
Wow.
Probably not.
Okay. Even though this disappearance is over 40 years old?
Yeah, a lot of the times when law enforcement doesn't want to do that and release the file, it usually means they'll say that it's because it's an active investigation.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's part of it, but a lot of the times they don't want anybody else to know that they haven't done anything with the case in that long either. So
right.
That's what this case is.
Yeah, Anthony, I agree with you. That is surely true. They'd say that they're working on it, and then you find out that if you happen to get the file, that there's no entries of anything being done for like the last 20 years. That is I think that's some very good insight on your part. Thank you. Well, at least you have that, being that you got interested in Beatrice's disappearance. Of course, we know a lot of times people don't get anything. So at least you had that to work on. So let's, and of course, I'm sure some of that information is going to come up as we proceed here. Let's just talk a little bit about Beatrice. Her nickname was BB, the letters BB twice, BB. But what can you tell the listeners a little bit about her age, where she lived, her family, any children, anything like that? What does the public need to know?
BB was 19 years old at the time she disappeared on September 28, 1980. She came from a good-sized family. She had 3 sisters and 1 brother, and she was a graduate of a school in San Antonio, a beauty school. And she was also a manager at a beauty salon in San Antonio as well. She was a very social, seemed like she was kind of a real social person, real good-looking young lady.
Yeah.
And she seemed to work very hard, too, so.
Right. Yeah, and we have to remember she was very young. Even though you just said, she went to school and she was doing this, doing that, she was like only 18 or 19 years old when she went missing. That was it.
She was 19, yeah.
19. Okay. And was she, we'll get into specifics a little bit later, but was she living at home still? Was she originally from the San Antonio area? Were her, family members around that area?
Yeah, her parents were in the San Antonio area. She was from San Antonio. I believe she was born there. And some of her sisters, one of the sisters, Thelma Frias, who she was supposed to visit at some point near the time that she went missing, was living in Chicago at the time. But she was also from San Antonio as well, too. So.
Okay, so she had, even though she was young, had her family close, had the support system there, but she was living by herself.
Yeah, she was living in a condominium at the time.
Okay. Now let's, you already mentioned him, this guy, Oscar Lozano. Now, you told me not long before we started this interview that he is deceased now. That's right?
Yeah, he died in 2008, yeah.
Okay, so as we continue with this, the listeners I think should know that. So I think that means I think we can talk a little more freely about him. What was the relationship between Oscar Lozano and Beatrice there in the late 70s into 1980?
Apparently she met him socially. I'm assuming since she was the younger sister of the four sisters, and Thelma Frias seems to be married into Lozano's family. I'm assuming she may have met him at like a social function, maybe a family function, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But he ended up giving her a job at one of his beauty salons in San Antonio. She ended up becoming a manager of that.
Mm-hmm.
And he also seemed to take care of her. He was a married man. He was 37 at the time, around 37
Wow.
at the time that they met. He was already married with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems that they may have had a unique relationship, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of seems to be the kind of guy that maybe he does seem kind of like a slime ball to me.
Okay.
He seems to be one of those guys that wants to impress a young woman because he probably couldn't impress a woman of his age group. So since he was a businessman in the area, you could throw around a lot of cash and try to impress a young, pretty girl like Bibi.
Mm-hmm. Now, I have it in quotes here. Of course, all the listeners know that I do use outlines to do these interviews with everybody. But I think I have this in quotes that Oscar and Beatrice had known each other for several years. Is that true? How could that be if she was only, 19 years old? Was he like a friend of the family or something? Or do you know?
Yeah, like I said, Thelma is married into Lozano's family. I don't know exactly when she did. I'm assuming that they were acquainted that way or in some other way socially.
Okay.
And they had like I said, they had a unique relationship, just called a relationship on the side, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably she probably was involved with him before she was 18.
Okay.
And of course, at the time, people didn't look at it as badly as they do now, which it doesn't make it right, but it was a little different then.
Okay. Would you say then, to just use a word, is it possible that Beatrice was like his mistress? The woman on the side?
So, yeah.
Something like that?
Something like that, yeah. I don't think that they were exclusive or anything, but I think he ended up trying to control her. I think he may have had feelings for her, and she may not have reciprocated the same type of feelings.
Okay. And I know you, as well as anybody who's ever been on the program, know how to look these things up. Oscar, criminal record. Of course, he's deceased now, but anything before she went missing, after she went missing, the 80s into the 90s, ever able to find any criminal charges against him in Texas or anywhere else?
None that I could find, no.
Wow. Okay. That is interesting then. Do you happen to know, being that he was married at the time of her disappearance, do you know if Oscar and his wife continued to be married until he died in the 2000s?
It would seem that he was with married to the same woman the entire time, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. All right, great. All right, let's move on to a few things. Of course, you've mentioned maybe he was trying to impress her, and these items are going to come up regarding her actual disappearance, but I just have this in the outline as stuff. He had given her some gifts. What were they? Did Beatrice show them off? What were some of the things that he tried to impress her with?
Well, for one, the condominium that she was living in San Antonio was his condominium. So she lived there, and he apparently, to my knowledge, she wasn't paying anything. That was just an arrangement that he had with her.
Okay.
He also left her with a good chunk of money that he claimed she was keeping for him, which ranged around $4,000 to $5,000.
Huh.
And he seemed to buy her a lot of expensive gifts like gold chains, bracelets, and a couple Rolexes that she did show off a lot.
Okay.
And like I said, he owned the beauty salon she worked at. She was the manager there, so he seemed to take care of her.
Okay. Granted, I know that you haven't been able to speak to her family, but any of the work that you've done, ever get a feel for how her family felt all about this? Any quotes in any articles, for example, written about her disappearance, where her family, speaks in a negative way about Oscar or anything like that you found?
None at all. No, they haven't. They don't mention him ever.
Ever.
The only way I found out about him is through the redacted file that I was able to get a hold of. Otherwise, you wouldn't, by going just based on what was online and what's been written, you wouldn't know anything about him.
Okay, so what you're saying is even when you found out about her disappearance, got interested in it, you didn't know about Oscar until you got that file.
No,
okay, very good. Okay, that is very interesting to me. Okay, so he is kind of giver into this stuff, even though he's married. Is it clear to you, and once again looking at the file, if his wife knew about her? Do you have a feel for that at all? Once again, you have a lot of experience in disappearances. Any feel for that, whether his wife knew or not?
I wouldn't know. I would assume she probably had an idea, but I don't have nothing to base that on.
Okay, and so this condo, he had owned it, and she's living in it. Any idea how long she had been living there before she went missing?
For around a year.
For about a year. Okay, so he kind of moved her in there. He's giving her this stuff, but she's still living on her own there in his place. Okay. But at some point, just in general, if anybody were to look this up, there is this idea that at some point they had a falling out. What was this falling out? Why did it happen? Because this is when we, all this stuff about these gifts and everything kind of pop up again. What was the falling out? And he took the stuff back. What do you know about that?
Well, like I said earlier, I think he may have had a little bit more of an attachment to her than she had to him. I'm not saying or trying to impute on her character at all. I think she had a few different quote unquote boyfriends that she dated around. I'm not saying that she got around, but she's a pretty young girl. So when you look like that, you can get a lot of attention, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he seemed to get jealous pretty easily. I think that their arrangement was since he was married. They may have just been a side thing. He hired her in as a manager of his salon and so on. But when he found out about certain people that she dated, like she dated this Navy guy named Joel Sotelo, I guess when he found out about that, he kind of exploded, and he fired her from the salon and took all her gifts back. And not long after, they reconciled, I guess, and he gave them all back, and he rehired her. So.
Okay.
It seemed to be kind of a rocky kind of a relationship.
Okay. Do you know regarding this blow up being that she gave these gifts back, or maybe he just took them back? Did she continue to live in the condo, or did she go back to living with her family? Do we know anything about that?
I'm not sure. It doesn't mention anything about in the redacted file. I would assume she still was living at the condo.
Okay.
I think this may have been something he may have been prone to doing when he found out that she may have been dating somebody. He may have exploded, and it may have been something that happened multiple times.
Right.
I'm not sure.
Excellent. That's probably a very good point too. That just because this happened the time that we know about before she went missing does not mean that was the only time.
Right.
Yeah, but and a guy doing this, it would not surprise either of us. We're both adults here. It would not surprise us if he threw these tantrums more than once because of who he was and who she was.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, so they have a falling out, but they patch things up. She goes back to working for him. She continues to live in this condo. She gets this stuff back, seemingly. But do you even know how long this period was? This particular last, I guess, you know, down period. How long it lasted? Just a few days, a week? Anything about that at all?
It's not sure. You can kind of get an idea based upon the record file, but I don't know. Probably a few days. I'm not even sure how close it was in terms of the between that and the disappearance date. It doesn't give you exact dates on when this happened. It's just prior incident.
Okay, very good. This other guy that you've mentioned, have you looked him up? Have you tried to contact him to talk to him about Beatrice? Is he still alive? Do we even any of that? Do we know about any of that?
Yeah, since my cases are, like I said, I'm constantly working on them.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I get leads on new ones all the time, but
yeah.
Fratello is still alive. But I have not been able to get a hold of him, but I haven't had the time to do it either.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, you're
but
busy guy.
As far as I know, he's still alive, and he was a former Navy guy, and he seems like a pretty good dude based upon what I've read about it.
Okay. Well, I'm sure myself and the listeners would like to hear of one of these days. Once again, I know you're a busy guy. You got a lot of things going on. But should you ever get to talk to him, I think everybody would be interested to hear what he has to say, what, he thought back in 1980 about all of this.
Yeah.
Of course, 1980, maybe he's 20 years old, 21, 22 at the time or something. He'd be close to 60 years old now. So we're over.
Years old, you're dead on.
Yeah, so he probably has a very good perspective now 40 years later. Okay. One more thing that I know in your blog that you've written about it, that she planned at some point, but she disappeared first, to go to Chicago. You've already mentioned that she had a sister who lived there, and in fact, Oscar bought the tickets. What was this going to be? Why was she going to go there? What was it? Some sort of vacation or for work, or what was it?
Actually, he might have bought those tickets. I'm not sure. I couldn't ever verify that. Selma, the one that went to Chicago, could have bought them too. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But she did plan on going to Chicago to visit her sister and possibly move there. She was possibly, I heard she was going to some kind of conference, a beauty salon conference, something like that. And she was looking to possibly start a business there in Chicago. But the tickets that she received was never cashed in or refunded or anything. They were never used.
Right, and we have to remember, I guess, Anthony, we have to put this in 1980 terms. These were back in the days when people actually got paper tickets. The tickets got mailed to them. It's not like, of course, today where you can get on a plane just with your phone and they scan something. So somebody would have actually bought paper tickets, and they would have been mailed, and she would have gotten them that way. All right, so we're not sure who got them for her, but your belief is she was going to there maybe with the possibility of moving from Texas to Illinois.
It sounds like it, yeah. I think she was trying to put some distance between her and Oscar. I think that she realized that it was not a healthy thing to do any longer.
Okay. Now, what do we know? What is the timeline of events on that day that she disappeared? The accepted disappearance date, 41 years later, September 28th of 1980. What do you know about Beatrice's movements that day?
Well, it's all based upon what Lozano says happened. He claims that around in the morning at some point, there's no exact time, that she was supposed to help him transfer some beauty supplies from one place to another, which she'd be unloading them at the beauty salon. He claims that she assisted him in that, and that was the last time that he saw her, or that anybody saw her. Later that day, she was supposed to pick up her niece and nephew from her sisters, Mary Ellen Coronado, and spend some time with them, and she never ended up showing up.
Never showed up.
And, right. Lozano's the last person to have seen Bibi.
Okay. is there any proof, once again, being that you've had the files, you've had a chance to look over them and the research that you've done, is there any proof that they went to like this salon place? Did anybody see those two together? If they were supposed to take things to the salon, was anybody else working that day, or was this like a Sunday or something when the thing was closed? Did anybody come forward to verify that they saw Oscar and Beatrice together that day? Anything?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No.
I can't verify if the salon was open at the time or not. So.
Okay.
But if you read the police file,
yeah,
I would assume if somebody else saw them, they would be mentioned in there somewhere, and it's not.
It's not mentioned that anybody saw her. So it very well could be that none of that happened.
That's quite possible. Yeah.
Okay, and just to, as an example, it very well could be, as you know, although when I have people like yourself on the program, I think the tolerances are not as tight when it comes to theorizing. But it very well could be, if we were to think that Oscar did something to her, it very well could be that this disappearance happened maybe the night before. Possible.
Possible, yeah.
Okay.
Very possible. Especially since she lived alone in a condominium. She didn't live with anybody.
Yeah.
And she was supposed to be at work the following day. And she had a cousin that worked at the salon with her. And they had called the family saying that she had not came into work, and they were worried about her.
Okay. Did she own a car? If she didn't end up there and she went missing, what about her car? I know that's something we'll talk about eventually, but was her car like at her condo? Was the car, where was it found?
The car was found some weeks later at an apartment complex. It's the Village Bordeaux apartment complex. It was found on the 9th of November.
Wow.
So it was over a month later.
Wow. Okay. And we'll certainly come back to that. So at the time, at the end of September, not only was she missing, her car was missing.
Correct. Yeah, it wasn't her car. It was actually in the name of Thelma Frias, the one she was going to be visiting in Chicago. It was actually her car.
Okay.
But she was letting BB use it.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So the car that she was using disappeared with her, and that was a mystery as well until it was found a month and a half later, roughly.
Right.
Okay. Who eventually filed the report? Was it the next day or the day after? Who filed it? And I guess it was the San Antonio Police Department that got it.
Right. Yeah, it was. There's a lot of different dates on the paperwork that I was given. The earliest date filed for that was the 30th of September, so it was roughly 2 days after she disappeared, and that was filed by her sister Thelma.
Okay, and Thelma was the one that lived in Chicago.
Right.
Huh. That's weird that the person who lived in Illinois was the one that filed the missing persons report. Any insight into that at all? Of why it was that family member, not somebody that lived in San Antonio? Any ideas?
Well, that's what it said on the reports, but if you watch some of the news reports from San Antonio, Thelma and the sisters talk about her dad, BB's dad, calling, and San Antonio police not making a big deal about it because she was 19 at the time, and they didn't want to think it was a missing persons case.
Right.
So I think her dad did try his best as he could. He was pretty furious. He's since passed away, but he was trying to plead with them to take it seriously, and apparently they did not.
Okay.
But the official record of police report filed is filed by her sister Thelma.
Okay. All right. So that the report gets filed. The police get involved, although it does sound like you said. It seems like they tried to blow it off right at the beginning when her father tried to do something. Did they go to the condo? Anything unusual there? We'll get to actually her stuff and it being missing, but the condo itself. Any signs of violence in there? Door kicked in? Anything of any evidence of any value found there, according to everything that you've looked into?
None whatsoever. There's no scene of any kind of forced entry, no blood or anything like that. Everything seemed to be, her personal belongings seemed to be there, although the gifts that she was given by Oscar were not there. So those were gone, but the car was not there. Like I said, it was found, at another apartment complex. Yeah. Which was roughly 7 miles south of her condominium.
Okay. And what was the name of that? I know you've already said it, but what is the name of that complex again?
The Bordeaux apartment complex. It's not really a complex. It looked like, I think it looked just like, I guess it could be a bunch of little apartment complex, little houses. That's what it looked like to me.
All right. Once again, I know you're probably not a San Antonio, Texas expert, but was this where car was found? Was it near the beauty school? Was it near the salon? Was it near where Oscar lived? Near any of those locations at all?
Like I said, I think I actually told you wrong. It was actually around 13 to 14 miles south of the actual salon that she worked at.
Okay.
And the Lozano lived about 7 miles west of the salon, which would be about 7 to 8 miles away from the Villa Bordeaux apartment complex.
So not close at all.
Not close, no.
Okay. Any connection that you've been able to see, once again, in working on it and then publishing it, and since then, any connection that you can see between, let's just say Oscar and that a part of town, anything that he might have had another, if he was owner of beauty salons, plural, anything like that?
No, but the car, when it was found at the Villa Bordeaux apartment complex, it was parked in a spot that would normally have been the spot for a person that lived there. And there was a person that lived there was an exchange student from India that didn't own a car. So the parking spot that it was placed in was their parking spot, but since they didn't own a car, they didn't really pay attention. So it looked like it had been there for a while there. Someone either got real lucky in parking it there, or they knew that parking spot would have been open.
That's very right. It's, this is one of those things that fascinates us about disappearances, right, Anthony? Something like that. Did the person, was it just luck, or did somebody actually know something and knew it to park it there, and then it would just kind of blend in, right? It's just, those are the kind of things that keep us up at night. So it's in this complex. It just happens to be parked in a place where somebody would not use that parking place. Unlike, for example, I live in a condo building and there is no assigned parking. Okay. Anything unusual about the car? Damaged, out of gas? Did they do any forensics on it? And maybe I should ask you this: who found it?
It doesn't say, which is interesting. They don't say who reported it missing. I mean, someone reported the car missing, I'm sure, but they don't. It's saying the report who found the actual car. But she did have some links to that apartment complex. She was reported seen there, at least on one occasion, in the hallway of one of the managers of the building. They said that they recognized her when they showed the picture of her there, and she had been there probably a few weeks prior to her disappearance, but they don't know who she was seeing, who she would have been seeing there. There was a couple people that they had actually showed her picture to, and they said that they did not recognize her. But I think she probably knew somebody at that complex, and that Lozano probably knew that she knew somebody at the complex, but there's nothing else related to that. I think that car was planted there intentionally.
Okay, so as best as you can tell, your opinion is that maybe then that apartment complex was not picked necessarily randomly.
No, it wasn't.
Okay.
It was done intentionally, I think.
Okay.
In my opinion.
All right, so what you're also saying is this person who says, "Oh yeah, I saw Beatrice here once or twice," you actually believe that eyewitness person. You find that to be fairly credible.
I do. I think that. Okay. Yeah, I think it's credible.
Okay, very good. All right, so the car is there. Obviously did not lead anywhere because his disappearance is still unsolved 41 years later, and we know even to this day how sometimes cars and doing any forensics on them is kind of blown off in disappearance cases. All right, but the car was found, but like you said, it took like a month and a half.
Yeah, they did do forensics on the car.
Oh, they did. Okay.
They did, but they didn't find anything, and they released it to Thelma not that long after.
Okay. Do you, looking at the paperwork, is it your impression that they thought that the car had been there since pretty much the day she went missing, or was it like it didn't appear there until like mid-October? Can you even tell?
I think that it was probably there based upon how you read the report and how it's stated. I think it was probably there the entire time.
Okay. So the report gets filed. Her car is also missing, and then somebody comes across her car somehow. Just randomly. I guess what you're also saying is this student, whoever he wasn't the one who called it in to say, hey, somebody's in my parking spot. It was actually somebody else who found the car.
It probably was, yeah. It probably was somebody else. Like I said, that exchange student didn't know the car or vehicle, so they weren't paying attention. I mean, it could have been them, but I don't think that it was.
Don't you think it was?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Now, these tickets, we know that she never did end up going to Chicago. Did anybody ever, to your knowledge, attempt to refund them? Did anybody else try to use them? Nothing.
They were never refunded, and they were never used either.
Okay, so when that plane took off, whenever date it was, her seat was empty.
No. Yep, her seat was definitely empty.
Okay. I know we've already talked this, but I talked about this, but I just want to be clear on this. Really, we're just going, regarding the circumstances, the timeline of that day, we're only going by Oscar's word. There are no other scientific facts or other people's stories to go about what happened that day. To this day, anything that we read generally about what allegedly happened that day comes from Oscar.
Right.
Okay. Do you get an idea in the paperwork that you've seen that the police found his story to be believable? Is there anything in there that you seem that could maybe contradict what he says happened that day in the meeting? Anything at all?
Yeah, I can't get a feeling what law enforcement may have thought about the guy. I know that they asked him to take a polygraph test, and at first he said he would do it, but then he wanted to audio record it, and they told him he couldn't do it, so he backed out. But in terms of any idea about law enforcement, it doesn't say one way or the other.
So there's nothing in there, for example, and once again, I don't have a ton of FOIA experience getting this, but certainly within the last couple months with me filing this FOIA down in Monroe County, Florida, and getting 600 pages for a disappearance that we still have yet to cover on the program, I certainly got a good education there. So, and you're right, a lot of times they're not going to voice their opinions in any of the paperwork that you're going to get, and even so, maybe it was that was part of the redacted part in your file. But there's nothing, and nobody they talked to that they wrote down in any report that would contradict what Oscar said that day.
Well, he tended to try to point. He did do a couple things. He did try to tend to throw some names in to have some suspicion on their character. There's a couple people that like a local guy that worked at a bar that his family owned. He threw his name in there, and he claimed he never knew who, never was familiar with Beatrice. He couldn't even pick her picture out. So he tended to cast blame and aspersions on other people that he thought may have had something to do with the disappearance.
Yeah.
He did do that, and the people that they questioned, there was nothing that law enforcement could tie to them. So that was kind of weird.
Okay. Yeah, anybody, being that she lived in this condo, of course, that it was his, any information you were able to gather? Did they talk to, like, neighbors and see if the neighbors heard anything or saw Oscar over there? Anything like that in any of the paperwork? Any statements?
No, nothing like that, no.
Okay. All right. Now, so he was casting aspersions on other people, pointing the finger at other people. So I guess that, in a way, offering his own theory that somebody else caused this. As we've already stated, you looked into it and could not find any criminal record that he had, either before or after 1980. And he's been dead for a while, so you haven't even been able to. Of course, wouldn't have been able to talk to him about this. Is there any record that what you've heard? Of course, you did get to talk to that one family member. Usually, as you know, these men who, whether have a mistress or cheating on their wives, if one woman moves on, they usually get another one. Any record of that? Did Oscar maybe find another young lady after BB went missing? Any ideas?
Well, with people that do that, there's usually a pattern, so there probably was, but I wasn't able to track any of them down, or they didn't see in any of the files about it.
Okay. All right, so he has his story. It doesn't sound like the police were able to ever break that story, although the story does sound kind of vague, although he does mention a couple different locations. But you'd mentioned before about this Joel Sotelo, this other guy who is still around. What I found odd in reading your account of Beatrice's disappearance is that Joel admitted, maybe to the police or somebody else, that he broke up with her when she got fired from that job. I guess when Oscar found out about Joel or whoever else, there was this parting of ways, that Joel actually decided to distance himself from Beatrice. Any insight into that? Because in your own article, you said, on the other hand, that he said he loved BB. Any insight into that?
Yeah. I mean, when you read it, it can come across as him saying that he broke up with her because she got fired and stuff like that. But I think if you read into it and look at the actual phrasing, I think he may have been trying to save her dignity a little bit. Maybe she had told him that it was over, or maybe it was a mutual thing. I don't think that he just said, "Hey, I broke up with her because." He might well have been a guy that would do that. He may have loved her enough to where he didn't want to cause any more problems in her life. But from the way I read it, it could have been a mutual thing, or she could have said, "Hey, we can't continue," or she may have just told Oscar that, and they may have continued. Who knows?
Okay. Did you get a feeling that the police checked out Joel Sotelo at all?
Yeah, they did. They also looked into the people that the names Oscar gave, and they seemed to, early on, I mean, as of the past 40 plus years, they haven't done anything on the case. But at the time when it was initially reported and stuff, they did vet everybody. The name that may have come across that she may have been associated with. They did a good job in that area.
Okay.
So they did look into those people that he said, but nothing was ever came of it, really.
Okay. Being that you have the file, what is the newest piece of paperwork in that file? Of course, everything usually when they do this work is dated. What is the newest piece of paperwork in the file when you got it?
Sometime in 1982, if I remember correctly.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
See, listeners, this is what I mean when, people, they say, well, it's an ongoing investigation. It's not an ongoing investigation in Beatrice's case because Anthony has the paperwork and it's since 1982. There's not one piece of information in there since 1982. At least I can say with this FOIA that I did down here in Monroe County that although the disappearance happened in 1993, I could find paperwork in the FOIA that was as late as like 2014 or something like that. So
that's pretty good.
That is, I agree with you, Anthony. Nobody was more startled than myself and this girl's mother and sister when they found out about all this. So yeah, you're right, and you like to see that even though it's still unsolved. But in Beatrice's, it's kind of sad. It's just frankly kind of sad.
Police department. I don't know if they have a really good track record, especially when I looked into Princess's case.
Mm-hmm.
While I tried to submit a tip for Princess's case myself, the person that took the tip acted like they had something better to do. But I was just wasting their time. So I'm sure there are good people in the police department, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a lot more people that are just lazy about it than the people that actually do the work. I mean, I hate to say that, but you know, anytime they say that, you know, this is an active investigation, it's kind of like when you hear a news reporter on the news saying a named source in the such and such administration. Anytime they say that, you know, they just made it up. Nobody actually told them that.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I should ask you, being that Oscar is no longer with us and has not been around, I guess, for about 15 years or something now, have you entertained the idea of contacting, if his wife is still alive, contacting her somehow? Just calling her up? You know, have you thought about that or what?
That's a possibility. I would contact anybody. I'm not really shy about that.
I know you're not.
That may be involved.
I know you are not.
Too, so.
Yes, shy is certainly not part of your character, Anthony. That is totally true. That is totally true. So that is something, once again, you get more time. I know you're a busy guy. That would be something that you would consider doing.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So we have this disappearance. It kind of does sound like a mistress type of situation, kind of gone wrong. It sounds very similar to a disappearance we've covered a couple months ago, Brenda Sika, but Brenda was a lot older, and she had some other issues with drugs and things going on, but she was also kind of a mistress, kind of the same situation, so it reminds me a little bit of that. So that is Beatrice's disappearance, and of course, if you do, Anthony, you know you can call me or email me, message me anytime, but certainly if you get to talk to Joel or Oscar's wife or widow, I guess you'd call her, or some of Beatrice's family members, I'd certainly like to know about it, so we can update the listeners, should you get back to it at some time. All right, so let's move on to this. We're now going to talk about another case, although it is not a disappearance, but you certainly, your work and yourself have certainly gotten some nice attention for the work that you did on the murder of Dorothy Scott. So we're going to move on to that now. Let's talk a little about that. Let's just, for the listeners, give the general facts about Dorothy Scott, what went on that night. How did you first hear about this particular case? Let's talk a little bit about that, because that's going to eventually lead to you being on TV this year about it. Just tell them a little bit about Dorothy Scott.
Well, Dorothy Jane Scott was abducted and murdered in 1980, in May 29th, 1980.
Okay.
May 29th, 1980, she was a single mother that worked for it was a psychedelic shop that dealt with that kind of a crowd, kind of a drug crowd.
Okay.
But she wasn't into anything like that. She was the bookkeeper for the store. She ended up going missing after she took a friend to the hospital that night. And her body was found buried off a remote canyon road around 2 years afterwards, and her murder was still unsolved. That was one of the cases, I believe, if I remember correctly, that was the first murder case I ever wrote about, and I wrote about it because I had never heard of it before at the time. The case has kind of since exploded.
Yeah.
I contacted her son. I was the first person to contact her son, and I got, at first, there was only the one grainy newspaper picture of her, and it bothered me, because pictures tell the story of the person.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, can I get some more pictures? And he usually doesn't talk to anybody. It's still a very big thing to him, because it was his mom, and he was really young at the time. But we developed a rapport, and we're really close. We talk every day. But he sent me the photos and so on, and it kind of just snowballed from there. And then We ended up filming in May,
Yeah.
and the episode came out in just this past October,
Okay.
28th, I believe.
Let me, if I could,
Yeah.
if I could, I'd just like to ask you a little bit more about, of course, it was at least a disappearance for a couple years, and of course, her body was found. If I could ask you a couple more technicalities about her disappearance, what happened to this friend that she took this friend to the hospital? What had happened there? Do you know?
Well, she was attending a meeting at the shop that she worked at, and a friend of hers, or a coworker named Conrad Bostrom, was looking really ill, and according to the reports, he had suffered like a black widow spider bite, but I really think that it was probably an infection from a hypodermic needle that he used.
Oh, okay.
So she decided to take him to the hospital. He got checked out. They gave him some medicine, and she was with another lady there that worked with her. Her name was Pam. Her name is Pam Heed.
Okay.
And once she was getting checked out, apparently she was with Pam the entire time in the waiting room, waiting for Bostrom to come out after getting checked out. And she said she was going to pull her car up close to the actual hospital building so that he didn't have to walk all the way out there.
Yeah.
So they got his prescription filled at the hospital. It took really about 10 minutes. She still had pulled the car up. So they both walked outside, and they said that they saw what they thought was her car pulling out of the parking lot. Lights turned on, so it kind of blinded them, and it sped off away from them. And they had never saw her again after that.
Huh.
And then her body was found.
Right.
A couple years later. But during the whole time, right before she disappeared, was kidnapped, she was receiving calls, threatening calls from a male voice that he seemed to disguise his voice, but he was telling her that when he got her alone, he was going to cut her to pieces. The guy was a little sicko. And she didn't know who it was. She said she thought she would recognize the voice, but she couldn't place it. And then when she went missing, her parents started to get the same calls when she was missing at the time, and they didn't find the body. So up until the day, when they found the body, they still got a call, and they stopped shortly thereafter. And the case has been unsolved. They tried to put a tracer on their phone, but they never were able to get a location as to where the calls were coming from or who was doing the calls.
Okay. So I guess what you're saying here is if we are to believe that this guy who was calling her is the killer in her murder, then he somehow must have followed her and this other person to the hospital and was like waiting out there and was just sitting out there or something.
Yeah, the fact that the whole trip was spontaneous and it wasn't planned, and only the people at the meeting would have known about this unless he was just sitting out there waiting for her and following her everywhere, which he could have been. But the fact that she went to the hospital and it wasn't scheduled leads me to believe that there's only a certain amount of people that would have known that she was going to do that.
Right.
So.
Right, and it also raises the question, if this person followed her to the hospital and was in her car, driving her car, then I guess this person, if this person's working alone, then he must have left his car there or used a taxi to follow her, follow that car type of situation. I know since you wrote about this in your first murder, you've probably thought about those things. What is your best guess?
Yeah, somebody likely followed her there. They drove their car. They probably had to come back to get theirs because they set her car on fire. Her car was found the next morning several blocks away. It was burned, and it was likely to get rid of evidence. And she was likely murdered the night she was taken or abducted. But because they found her remains, but it was only a partial set. And it's a really bizarre case. I think I know who did it, but Interestingly enough, the guy that was supposed to film a segment for the episode, I'm told, but when he found out I was going to be there, he didn't want to do it. So.
Okay. We'll get into that in a moment. So what you're saying is even though her remains were not found anywhere near this hospital, her remains were not found anywhere near her car where it was burned.
Right.
Okay. And so conceivably somebody could have been waiting there. She comes out. Of course, the person wouldn't have known that she was going to come out by herself, but, he attacks her, goes into the car, kills her, and then kind of drives back into town, tortures her car, then could have walked back to his car, which was just, right down a block from the hospital. Conceivable. It's a possibility.
Or he could have had somebody else helping.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Of course, that is also a choice as well. So there would be no forensics even in 1980 terms, given that the car was burned up. Were her remains, I guess they were found by accident, her remains?
Yeah, it was a contractor that was laying down lines for telephones. Back then, he laid the lines through the ground.
Yeah.
And he came across them that way.
Okay.
And then, it was a total accident. But ironically enough, the guy that owned the shop that she worked at, there was 2 shops that he owned.
Yeah.
The remains were found on land that he owned.
Huh. What kind of coincidence is that?
Yeah, very interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, you would, but it's one of those counterintuitive things. You wouldn't think that somebody who killed somebody would. Of course, we know that's happened. Dennis Bowman with Andre Bowman, Carlos Rodriguez, and Zoe Campos. So I guess it's not crazy to think that a killer would put a dead person on his own property. But this is it sounds like a little bit different situation than those.
Well, it's interesting because the place that it was found, the partial remains were found, had undergone some changes geologically. There was brush fires and stuff.
Okay.
And floods, and I don't believe the location that they found the remains in was the actual original where she was originally disposed of. Since it was a partial set of remains and the fact that that area had undergone geological changes.
Okay. And where was this? Just generally, where was this? These remains? What part of California?
It was Anaheim, and it was off Santa Ana Canyon Road.
Okay.
It's still, even when I went to visit it there, it was still. There wasn't a whole lot of stuff around it, and back then there still wasn't a whole lot of stuff around it, even when I visited there.
Okay. All right. So then, this is the first murder case that you ever wrote about. When did you write about it? How long ago, Anthony?
Ooh, that would have been probably the first year of my blog.
So 2016, 2017, somewhere in there?
Yeah, there's been updates in the entries over the years that I've been able to get more and more information, but yeah.
Okay. So how did you react when TV came a-calling and contacted you? Was that a surprise, or did you think it was a joke, or what did you think?
Well, they had contacted me initially to get a hold of the son, Sean. He only talks to me. I'm not bragging about that. He likes my approach. He's had approaches from other people and he just doesn't like the way they approach him about it.
Okay.
I don't know. What made me different? I think he said because it showed that I actually cared. I wasn't trying to just get my name out there. I actually cared about the case. A lot of the other people just want to have their own agenda, I guess.
Right. Yeah, we know about that. Sure.
But they called me. They asked me if I can get a hold of them or hold of him for them, and I did. And then maybe he's usually a pretty quiet person. You have to actually ask him, what happened, because he doesn't get back quick. You got to ask him. It's just his personality.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear about it from him, but they called me maybe 2 weeks after that, and they said they wanted me to be involved. And I didn't know. I was like, okay, well, I can do that. And they flew me out to Anaheim, and they paid for everything, and they interviewed me, and I ended up being in a part of the episode. It was pretty cool. But come to find out, he only wanted to do that. It was part of the conditions of him doing the episode that I had to be there. And I didn't know that, which was pretty cool of him.
Yeah, that is cool of him. Wow, that's really neat. Now, I do have to ask you, you are a person who likes to protect your identity. Of course, I know that I know your last name, but I've never ever mentioned to anybody publicly or privately. Of course, I only introduce you as Anthony every time you've been on the program, but you're, as a person who tries to really keep his identity and his profile very low. How did it feel like being in front of the camera, everybody seeing you, et cetera? How did you come to the decision that, I have to do this, even though since I started the blog, I've kind of, been a little mysterious about my identity. What was the thought process?
Well, that's more of the reason behind me doing that is I've actually confronted suspects and cases face to face before.
I know you have. Yes. Yeah.
Me getting my face recognized is not real important to me. It's just that's more of a protection thing for my girls.
Okay, of course.
Because I'm a dad. So
yeah.
But it was different. But there's been a number of bad people that have seen me in person, so it didn't really bother me. It was different. It was definitely different though. But I wasn't worried about that at all, really. It was just, it was an experience, definitely a different experience.
Okay. Of course, as I know, although I've not, been on a program like that, I know that they can interview you for a long time and then only use a very small part. What was your experience with that?
Basically what you saw, is, see, the good thing about it, the show was Lozano. Lozano, and the crew that I worked with was a really great crew. They made it really easy, but most of what you saw there, I think, I ended up fumbling. I was really nervous, but they did a good job of making me not look like an idiot. I think they only didn't show one question, and I fumbled it.
Okay.
Because I was nervous, and I just blurted out something. And after I told them I did that, I was like, I don't like that, because that's not what I meant to say. I was just flustered. But most of what you saw on there is what we did. They didn't. There was a part that when we were walking around outside, and they were asking me questions, and they were kind of doing a walkthrough, and we didn't have that part in because there was a vagrant that just kept getting on my nerves. He kept asking for money, and I think they cut it out. But I didn't react professionally at all. So, but they didn't really seem to care.
Okay, that's funny.
But most of what you see in the episode is what we did. Yeah, they didn't cut out a whole lot. It was pretty quick.
Okay. How many, so you were, Hollywood, Studio City, Burbank, what area were you in?
Actually, we filmed at the hotel that they actually set us up in because of the COVID.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't go into the studios or something, so we kind of did everything there.
Okay. All right, and how many days were you out there?
3.
Okay.
3 days.
Neat. Well, that probably. How did you feel about that? Do you think you would be, sometimes it sounds like you had a good experience, but I'm going to ask anyway. Would you be involved in something like that again? For maybe another disappearance or murder that you've covered?
Yeah, sure. Why not? It was a different experience. Like going from Texas to California is like going to another planet. It was weird.
Yeah.
But it was hustle and bustle. Everybody was busy. And that area never slept.
Yeah.
It was interesting.
Okay. So you were pleased with the final product? Pretty pleased with it?
Yeah, and they were great. And the whole crew was great. It's a real credit to that show. Very professional people.
All right, great. Now, you did say, though, getting back to the actual murder, is that you have some insight. You have an opinion on who did it, on what happened. Do you feel comfortable voicing what you think, who it was and why it happened and everything else? Can you say that here?
Yeah, because he's not going to do nothing about it. Yeah, it's the owner of that store that did it, I think. I'm almost certain he's responsible. And and she did the books for both of his stores that he owned at the time, and about 10 years after she disappeared, she got indicted on federal tax evasion charges.
Oh, he did.
So, yeah. So there's a couple of different reasons, but he may have wanted her out of the way.
All right, and that then would explain how he knew that she would be at the hospital and everything else.
Oh yeah.
And then as you've already said, her remains were found on his property. Okay.
And I did not know that. That was news to me, and I didn't know that until her son gave me the big file, and I was reading over it there. I did not. That was something I was really surprised at knowing.
Okay. Do you know, now that you know that, do you know if back at the time that did police look into this owner, tried to connect him to her disappearance, what turned out to be a murder? Did they attempt to do that, or what do you think?
I'm trying to phrase this in a professional way. Anaheim police, no, let's just say no.
No.
I don't think that they, no, the whole police department is very unique.
Okay.
It's like, I don't know how to explain it. Let's just say that they care about how they look more than they care about investigating cases.
Okay. Is there anything that you, when you wrote it, and then anything since, of course, talking to her son, did she ever, before she, of course, went missing and then was murdered, did she ever express anything like, I kind of discovered that my boss is doing this or he's doing that, and anything like that at all that has come up?
Not to my knowledge, no. No, but she was really concerned about her safety. She was taking self-defense classes, and she thought of buying a gun, but since her son was so young at the time, she decided against it. She didn't want Tim Baxton to get a hold of it or anything. But no, she was worried about her safety, and so on. But nothing that I know or have read or anything that says anything about that she thought poorly of the owner or anything like that.
Okay, so even though that's your theory, it sounds like a good one to me. But of course, the issue is that she's the one that went missing and was murdered, and no other employee or anybody else, of course, went missing or was murdered. But may just have been because of the position that she had there, kind of looking over the books.
Probably, yeah.
Okay. All right.
But I will say that her son does not agree with my theory.
Oh, he doesn't.
So. No, he doesn't.
Okay. Do you feel comfortable saying what he believes happened?
He believes that there was another guy that the police actually interviewed, and I actually had his name listed in my entry. His name was Mike Butler. He was an odd cat, and he seemed to be in love with Dorothy.
Okay.
And he seemed to think that he was responsible, but I just, I need more to entertain that theory. I'm open to it. I'm never closed anybody off like that, but I just don't see that being the case.
Okay.
At this time, anyway.
All right.
He's since passed away.
Oh, he has. Okay. Do you know if the owner of the store is still alive?
He is, yeah.
He is,
yeah,
okay.
He doesn't want anything to do with me either.
I'm sure he doesn't. Okay. All right, so we have a couple different possibilities there, I guess. But given the circumstances, it would seem that somebody knew that she was going to be there, unless we are to believe that she went out to the parking lot and just got carjacked. Randomly, which, of course, as we know, does happen. Where this hospital was, shady area, safe area? Usually...
there's no shady parts of Anaheim. Now, the funny thing is that people that live there, they think there are bad parts of Anaheim, but when you have Teslas driving by in the bad parts of Anaheim, it's really hard for me to take that seriously.
Okay. All right. Good point, Anthony. Okay, I gotcha. So, and usually, of course, especially like in places like hospitals, the parking lots are lit and things like that. So it just does add in another layer of complexity to all of this. On top of the fact is, somebody was following her. There's no way that person could have known that she would go out to her car by herself. There's no way somebody could have known that. So, that's just, it is a little bit of a stumper, and maybe that's why it's still unsolved 41 years later. Is this something that you view, even though you have a very negative opinion of the Anaheim Police Department, is this something you think is still solvable? I know we get to be negative on here, but the way you look at it, her murder now.
It is, but time's ticking, and there's not a whole lot of time left to get the persons that are responsible. The one that I think is responsible is up there,
Mm-hmm.
and age. He talks a big game, but he doesn't seem to bluff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another story. But he seems to. He's one of those tough guys, but he didn't. I guess he didn't want anything to do with me, so I don't know about that. But.
Okay. Was Dorothy had a boyfriend at the time? Was she married, or what was her status?
No, she was single. She wasn't interested in. From what I understand, she wasn't interested in dating.
Okay.
She had nobody that she was seeing at all.
Okay, so not some disgruntled ex-boyfriend, something like that.
No, the father, Dorothy's son's real father was cleared of any involvement. He had passed away like last year, I believe.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, as you know, Anthony, the reason you've been on the program now, I think 5 times, is because I realize you do very complete work, very honest work. Your mind and your heart are certainly in the right place, and of course, I discovered that, of course, very early on. Going back, I guess it would be to 2017. So I feel real good that now even more people outside of the Unfound world and your audience for your blog and other places that you've appeared. The general public watching a show like Follows On, I'm glad they're now finding out about you as well. I was very excited for you. I continue to be very excited for you about getting the proper attention for your work. So, I'm very happy for you. Yeah, very happy for you.
And I feel the same way about you. Very, very honest work, and
thanks.
We're both passionate about it, and you're honest about it. You don't care about sponsors and all that other BS. So.
Well, I appreciate that. Appreciate that, Anthony. What do you got? What are you working on now? I just have to admit, it does seem like your work has slowed down a little bit, maybe once again because you're busy and all of these things. But, do you know when your next blog is maybe going to be published? Can you talk a little bit about that, or maybe just give a couple names of some disappearances or murders or whatever that you're currently working on that you think could be released in the near future?
Yeah, I've got Ashley Stander Griffin. That's a case of a young girl that went missing in Orange County, California. Not that far away from when Dorothy ended up getting murdered. Her case is unrelated, but that's one I'm working on. I've been talking to her brother that was a detective on her actual case for a long time. And that's one that's been in the works. And there's a couple others. I'm always looking to follow up with Tammy, case more. And I've been really working hard on trying to get some more information on
Princess Arabia's
disappearance. And murder / missing person case. So
right, and we should say when you say Tammy,
on the blog.
Yeah, I just want to be clear for the audience. When you say Tammy, you mean Tammy Leppert.
Yeah, Tammy Leppert, right.
Thank you.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The work on the blog has the writing has slowed down, but the work hasn't slowed down. That I can assure you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you give out the name of your blog? And I have to admit, everybody knows that I have a hard time because of how busy I am following what other people are doing, like podcasting and everything. Are you doing a podcast once in a while? You did that for a while. Are you still doing that? Maybe you need to talk a little bit about that too.
Oh, yeah, well, podcasts are a whole different ballgame for me. And the one I did with my partner. She runs Unsolved Appalachia. She's my best friend. Honestly.
Okay.
We did that, but neither one of us are really good at the editing and the podcast thing. And we are very similar in our moods to where I'll be going hardcore on work, and then she'll be taking a break, and then vice versa. The podcast that we did, she kind of did all that editing work, and I felt bad because I just can't do it.
Yeah.
But it didn't turn out the way I kind of wanted it to. So it's a possibility we might go back to that, but as of right now, we're not.
Okay.
But we did do it a little bit. We had a couple episodes, and it was different, but I don't think it was our cup of tea.
Okay. So you're back, I guess, primarily crime blogger 1983.blogspot.com. That's your primary output now. That's
Yes, sir.
that's your primary. Okay, everyone, I'll just tell them. Yes, everybody has to check out Anthony's work at crimeblogger1983.blogspot.com. Do you have a Facebook page or a group or anything like that on Facebook? Maybe also that people should know about.
Yeah, I've got a Facebook page for my blog. It's Sherlock 1983. Just put that in Facebook. I've got an Instagram page. I think it's CB 1983. Facebook doesn't like me because I end up, well, it's surprising that, a lot of these suspects in cases have Facebooks. So
Yes.
when you have that out there, I'm going to go after you. So
Yes.
Facebook really doesn't like me because I get in trouble for bullying. So every now and then they delete my Facebook and I have to create a new one.
Yes,
So,
I've noticed. I have noticed that. Yes. Right.
But, yeah, so Facebook's not real supportive of my work, but that's fine.
Okay. All right. So we have the website, we got the Facebook page, and okay. Well, Anthony, great talking to you again. Great talking to you about Beatrice's disappearance, and then also your experience with Dorothy's murder. Of course, it's still unsolved as well, and you getting your proper attention for your work. So, any final words before we complete this interview?
No, I really thank you for highlighting my work and Beyond Unfound, and I'll see you again sometime next year, I take it.
Yes, we'll make this like a once-a-year thing. If something pops up, some of the work, you get noticed again or something big happens, maybe like on one of the disappearances you've appeared for Unfound Tammys or Galas or Princesses, whoever's. Of course, we can't forget Evelyn Hartley's as well, which I've been thinking about that one quite a bit because it's very similar to the Janelle Matthews murder. I went out to Colorado. Very, very similar circumstances. So your work was on my mind regarding Evelyn's disappearance over the past few months. So, of course, something happens big regarding any of those cases, we'll have to talk again a lot sooner than next November.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
I love it.
All right. Well, yeah, absolutely. And thank you for being on this episode of Unfound.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And that was my November 18th, 2021 interview with Anthony from the website crimeblogger1983.blogspot.com. I thank him for appearing for the 5th time. If you're interested to know what other episodes he's appeared on, they are in order: Tammy Leppert, Evelyn Hartley, Princess Sarabia, and Gayla Shaper. Also, I made a YouTube video to diagram and explain the locations mentioned in this episode. Please go to the Unfound Podcast Channel to watch it. Please note, in the video, I will correct a mistake that Anthony and I made in the interview, and that is in regards to where Beatrice's car was found. Actually, it was found very close to where she lived. As many of you know, I look upon Unfound as an education program. Yes, we bring publicity to disappearances, and we've certainly moved some investigations forward. But I also try to show why they happen. Not so much the physical reasons, but the mental and emotional ones. This is where the answer to solving and stopping them lies. I'm convinced of it. And yes, as you've probably noticed, sometimes the lessons illustrated have nothing to do with disappearances. This is certainly the situation with Beatrice's case. For all of you women out there, 19, 29, or 79, nothing good can come from spending time with and accepting stuff from a man who is already married. Nothing. You exponentially raise the chances of you disappearing. On top of that, it's immoral. Don't do it. I don't care what sob story he gives you, or how poor you are, or whatever other reasons come up. Don't do it. So, what does that all mean for Beatrice's disappearance? It makes all the sense in the world that Oscar killed her. They already had problems. She seemingly had another guy. Beatrice planned to move away. There are problems, though. It seems Beatrice was seeing Oscar and the other guy at the same time. So how can we be sure there wasn't a third or fourth guy? Beatrice's car was parked in a space by someone who seemingly knew that assigned spot was never used. And the police couldn't connect Oscar to that apartment complex. And why would Oscar create such an elaborate alibi of being with Beatrice that day when he could have just said he didn't see her at all? Because it's clear that there is no proof they were together that day anyway, at least according to the paperwork that Anthony has. All these issues would have to be resolved to be truly sure Oscar killed Beatrice. However, I should also mention that just a few months ago, Unfound covered the disappearance of Brenda Sika, a case that has similar qualities to Beatrice's. And many of you did not think Brenda's married man, Jim, caused her disappearance. So that's a consideration. Although the mitigating factor in Brenda's could be that she certainly had more personal demons than Beatrice did. What I'm saying is, I think it shows that just because a man was keeping a woman does not necessarily mean he is keeping secrets about her disappearance. Maybe someone else is keeping them. I'll leave the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.